Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about a phrase that carries both awe and reverence. The most dangerous woman is the one who listens to God. Dangerous not because she threatens the innocent, but because she threatens the systems, lies, and forces that try to keep her small, voiceless, and disconnected from her divine purpose. A woman who listens to God carries a courage that cannot be manufactured by the world. While others try to control through noise, distractions, and the endless demands of society, she dares to surrender. She lays down her ego, her need for constant validation, and her obsession with comparison. In return, she picks up a deeper truth, a steady whisper that says, "You are chosen. You are enough. You are mine." That is where her true danger lies, because once she knows who she is in God, nothing else can enslave her. Listening to God is not a passive act. It is active, radical, and deeply courageous. It calls her to strip away masks, to reject perfectionism, and to walk into rooms with her whole heart intact. People may misunderstand her, criticize her, or even fear her, but she no longer bows to the noise. She stands in her authenticity, clothed not in societal approval, but in divine purpose. That authenticity becomes a sword that cuts through illusions. A woman who listens to God is resilient. Life may break around her, storms may rage, and loss may carve deep valleys in her heart. But instead of drowning in despair, she transforms pain into power. She learns to see every scar as proof of survival, every wound as a place where the light of God can shine through. Her resilience is not surface toughness. It is faith in motion, hope in the fire, and joy even in the ashes. Such a woman does not hoard her power for herself. Her compassion is radical and disruptive. She becomes dangerous because she refuses to participate in systems built on shame, judgment, or fear. Instead, she listens to God's voice that says love is stronger, mercy is louder, and grace is the true revolution. Her compassion terrifies those who benefit from division, because she insists on seeing the humanity in everyone. Finally, the most dangerous woman who listens to God is free. Free from chains of people pleasing, free from fear of rejection, free from the constant performance of trying to be enough for the world. She is no longer bound by the expectations others try to place on her. She walks in unshakable freedom because she belongs not to the crowd, not to the critics, not even to her past, but to God alone. So yes, she is dangerous. Dangerous to lies, dangerous to fear, dangerous to shame, dangerous to injustice, and dangerous to anything that tells her she is less than what God has called her to be. The world does not need more women silenced by doubt or trapped by comparison. The world needs more women who dare to listen. Women who will rise not with arrogance, but with humility and holy courage. Because when a woman listens to God, she becomes unstoppable, not for herself alone, but for the healing, restoration, and transformation of all those around her. The courage of surrender is one of the most profound truths that a woman who listens to God embodies. And it is the very foundation of why she becomes dangerous in the best and holiest sense of the word. To surrender in a world that constantly tells you to fight for control, to climb higher, to hustle harder, and to prove your worth at every turn is an act of rebellion. It is countercultural. It is almost incomprehensible to those who do not understand the voice of God, because they mistake surrender for weakness. But those who truly know God understand that surrender is not weakness, it is the bravest form of strength. It requires immense courage to place your trust not in yourself, not in other people, not in material security, but in the unseen and often unpredictable path that God lays before you. Think about the weight that women are told to carry from the moment they are young. They are told to be perfect daughters, perfect wives, perfect mothers, perfect professionals, perfect caretakers, and perfect human beings. The world sells them the lie that their worth is directly tied to how much they can do, how many people they can please, and how flawlessly they can juggle every expectation placed upon them. Control becomes their default setting, because society rewards those who can present the illusion of having it all together. But listening to God disrupts that illusion. God whispers in the silence, "You don't need to control everything. You don't need to prove yourself. You are already mine." To surrender to that voice means laying down the false armor of control and embracing the unknown. That is not weakness. It is courage. It takes courage because surrendering to God means letting go of your own script. Most people spend their lives trying to write the perfect script for themselves, imagining how their lives should unfold. They plan, they manipulate. They force, they push. Yet when a woman listens to God, she realizes that the script she has written is far smaller than the story God has for her. To surrender is to let go of that limited script and trust in something greater, even if it feels terrifying. It is saying, "Lord, I may not understand, but I will follow. I may not see the path clearly, but I will walk." The courage of surrender is not found in certainty, but in faith, and faith by its very nature requires risk. It requires stepping into the unknown with confidence that the one who calls you is faithful. This kind of surrender becomes dangerous because it makes a woman fearless in the face of circumstances that normally would crush someone. When you no longer believe that your safety depends on controlling every detail, you become untouchable by fear. The woman who surrenders to God can walk into uncertainty, and while others crumble under the anxiety of not knowing, she rests in the assurance that she is guided by a hand greater than her own. She may tremble, yes, but she still moves forward. She may feel the weight of challenges, but she does not collapse. She surrenders her fears daily, knowing that control was never hers to hold in the first place. True surrender also requires courage, because it often means standing against the voices of the crowd. People around her may not understand. They may mock her choices. They may question her path. They may even accuse her of being foolish. But a woman who listens to God understands that obedience sometimes looks like disobedience to the world. When God says move, she moves. When God says stay, she stays. When God says let go, she loosens her grip, even if everyone else insists she should hold on tighter. That kind of courage makes her dangerous, because she can no longer be manipulated by public opinion. She does not bend to cultural trends or the shifting winds of popularity. She bows only to God, and that loyalty makes her unstoppable. Surrender also means accepting vulnerability, and that is perhaps one of the greatest demonstrations of courage a person can show. Vulnerability means allowing yourself to be seen in your imperfection, to be open to failure, to admit that you do not have all the answers. The world tells women to hide their weaknesses, to bury their fears, and to project a facade of perfection. But God asks for something different. He asks for the open heart, the honest soul, the willingness to be real. A surrendered woman is not afraid to fall to her knees in prayer, to weep openly when the weight is heavy, to admit that she needs help, to cry out to her Creator in the rawest places of her life. That level of vulnerability is terrifying to most, but it is liberating to her. And once she learns to live in that kind of openness, she cannot be controlled by shame. That makes her dangerous because shame loses its power over her. Surrender also means letting go of outcomes. This is where courage becomes most visible, because our human nature longs to control how things end. We want to guarantee success. We want to secure the future. We want to know that our sacrifices will lead to reward. But surrendering to God means doing the right thing because He calls you to, not because you can guarantee the outcome. It means loving people even if they don't love you back. It means forgiving even if reconciliation never comes. It means stepping into opportunities, even if they don't turn out the way you expected. That courage to act without demanding control over the results is rare, and it is dangerous because it makes a woman unbreakable. Nothing can defeat someone who has already laid the results in God's hands. the courage of surrender is also contagious. When people witness a woman living in true surrender, they begin to question their own lives. They wonder how she maintains peace when others are falling apart. They wonder why she is not controlled by fear or bitterness. They wonder how she can walk with such confidence even when circumstances are uncertain. Her life becomes a testimony, and it awakens something in others. It plants seeds of faith, it sparks hope, it inspires courage. That influence is dangerous because it threatens systems that thrive on fear, oppression, and control. Once women see what is possible through surrender, they cannot go back to living small. Ultimately, surrender is the courage to trust God with everything: your past, your present, your future. It is the courage to believe that He knows better, that He sees further, and that His plans are greater. And once a woman embraces that, she becomes unstoppable. The courage of surrender doesn't mean she will never feel afraid. It doesn't mean life will be easy. And it doesn't mean she will never stumble. But it does mean she will rise again and again, anchored by a strength that is not her own. So yes, the most dangerous woman is the one who listens to God. And the very first step in becoming her is surrender. It is courage clothed in humility, strength wrapped in vulnerability, and faith that defies fear. She does not surrender to defeat. She surrenders to victory, a victory that only comes from aligning her heart with God's will. That kind of courage is unshakable, unstoppable, and yes, beautifully dangerous. The power of authenticity is one of the most remarkable gifts a woman who listens to God carries within her. In a world built on masks, performance, and the exhausting chase of approval, authenticity shines like a rare jewel. It is dangerous because it is disarming. It is powerful because it cannot be manipulated. It is beautiful because it reflects the truth of God's design without distortion. A woman who chooses authenticity after listening to God does not live bound by the illusions the world demands of her. She lives anchored in who she really is. And that is the greatest strength she could ever embody. Authenticity requires a stripping away of everything false. From childhood, women are often taught to play roles. They are told to be nice even when they are hurting, to smile even when they are breaking, to keep the peace even when injustice is present. They are trained to present a certain version of themselves that is acceptable to others, a polished surface that hides the real story beneath. But God never asked for performance, He asked for truth. When a woman listens to Him, she hears a voice that calls her deeper than the surface. She hears Him saying that He knit her together in her mother's womb, that every detail of her is intentional, that He delights not in her perfection, but in her honesty. To respond to that call is to shed the masks and walk in authenticity. Authenticity is not easy. In fact, it is one of the hardest things to live out, because it often invites criticism. When you stop living for the expectations of others, you will almost certainly disappoint someone. The world thrives on conformity. It rewards those who fit neatly into categories, who follow the rules of appearance, who never rock the boat. But the woman who listens to God is not concerned with fitting in. She is concerned with being real. She does not measure her worth by how much applause she receives or how many people approve of her. She measures her worth by the truth that God speaks into her heart. That authenticity is dangerous because it cannot be bribed, bought, or broken by external forces. There is a quiet power that comes when you live authentically. It is the power of freedom. No longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of pretending, you begin to breathe again. You begin to realize that your story, with all its scars and struggles, is sacred. You begin to understand that your imperfections are not evidence of your inadequacy, but proof of your humanity. A woman who listens to God and embraces authenticity does not hide her wounds. She uses them as testimony. She does not deny her past. She redeems it by showing others what God can do with broken pieces. That authenticity is magnetic because it gives permission to others to stop pretending too. Authenticity also makes a woman resilient, because when you live honestly, there is nothing left for others to use against you. Think of how often people are held captive by secrets, by the fear of being exposed, by the pressure of maintaining an image. But when you are authentic, there is nothing to expose. You are already living in the light. The woman who listens to God does not fear the whispers of gossip or the judgment of critics, because she has already brought her true self into the presence of the one who matters most. That resilience makes her dangerous because she cannot be controlled by shame. Shame has no place in an authentic life, because authenticity says, yes, I am flawed, but I am still worthy. Yes, I have failed, but I am still loved. Yes, I am imperfect, but I am still enough. Living authentically also requires courage, because it often means choosing the narrow path over the wide one. It means saying no to opportunities that don't align with your values, even if they look glamorous. It means refusing to participate in gossip, even if it would win you popularity. It means telling the truth in relationships, even if it risks rejection. It means following God's calling, even if it doesn't match the world's definition of success. That kind of courage disrupts the expectations of others and sets you apart. People may not always like it, but they will respect it, because authenticity carries a weight of integrity that cannot be faked. One of the most dangerous aspects of authenticity is its ability to break cycles. For generations, women may have been taught to suppress their voices, to hide their emotions, to live behind carefully crafted masks. But when a woman listens to God and chooses to live authentically, she refuses to pass down those chains. She raises her children differently. She influences her community differently. She teaches by example that honesty is not something to fear, but something to embrace. In doing so, she plants seeds of freedom in those who come after her. Authenticity has a ripple effect. It spreads far beyond the individual life and transforms the atmosphere around her. Authenticity also creates deep connection. When we live behind masks, people may admire us, but they cannot truly know us. Relationships built on performance are fragile because they are built on illusion. But when a woman lives authentically, she invites others to meet her in truth. She creates safe spaces where people feel they don't have to pretend either. She listens without judgment. She shares without pretense, and she loves without condition. That kind of presence is healing in a world where so many people are starving for real connection. The woman who listens to God becomes a well of authenticity that others can draw from, and her relationships are marked not by superficiality, but by depth and honesty. Authenticity is also about alignment. To be authentic is to align your outer life with your inner truth. It means that the words you speak, the choices you make, the values you live by are consistent with who you really are and what God has called you to be. That alignment creates integrity, and integrity is one of the most unshakable forms of power. A woman of integrity cannot be bought because her loyalty is not for sale. She cannot be corrupted because her values are not negotiable. She cannot be silenced because her voice is anchored in truth. That kind of authenticity is a threat to systems built on lies, manipulation, and control. It exposes hypocrisy simply by existing. It challenges injustice simply by refusing to play along. Authenticity is not about being perfect. It is about being real. And that is what makes it dangerous. Perfection is an illusion. Authenticity is the truth. And truth, once revealed, cannot be undone. When a woman listens to God and chooses to live authentically, she becomes a beacon. People may resist her at first, but they cannot deny the impact of her presence. She embodies light in the midst of darkness, honesty in the midst of pretense, freedom in the midst of bondage. She lives in a way that says, I am exactly who God made me to be. And that is enough. The power of authenticity is transformative. It frees the woman herself, it frees the people around her, and it shakes the foundations of every system that thrives on deceit. This is why the most dangerous woman is the one who listens to God, because His voice will always lead her to authenticity. And once she finds the courage to live that way, there is no turning back. She becomes a living testimony that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to pretend to be loved. And you don't have to hide to be accepted. You simply have to be who God made you to be. And that is where her true power lies. Resilience through faith is one of the defining marks of a woman who listens to God, and it is part of what makes her so dangerous to the forces of fear, despair, and defeat. Life will always bring trials, storms, and seasons that feel unbearable, but the difference between being crushed by them and being strengthened by them lies in where you place your trust. The woman who listens to God does not pretend life is easy. She does not deny the existence of pain or minimize the reality of hardship. Instead, she chooses to anchor her heart in a faith that refuses to let her sink. That resilience, born not of her own strength, but of God's presence within her, makes her unshakable in the face of adversity. Resilience through faith is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to walk through struggle without losing hope. Everyone faces storms. Everyone encounters loss, disappointment, betrayal, illness, and unexpected detours in life. But when a woman listens to God, she understands that these hardships are not the end of her story. She knows that pain is temporary, but God's promises are eternal. She hears His voice reminding her that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. That hope does not disappoint because it is rooted in something greater than circumstances. She may bend, but she does not break. She may stumble, but she does not stay down. Her resilience is not about denying her pain. It is about refusing to let pain define her. This resilience is dangerous because it makes her unstoppable. The world expects hardship to silence people. It expects failure to destroy confidence. It expects loss to drain purpose. But the woman who listens to God transforms adversity into fuel for her journey. Instead of being crushed by rejection, she uses it to clarify her calling. Instead of being destroyed by grief, she uses it to deepen her compassion for others. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, she uses it as an opportunity to demonstrate courage. Her resilience comes from knowing that God wastes nothing. Every wound, every scar, every tear can be redeemed and woven into a greater story. That perspective terrifies those who try to control her, because nothing they throw at her can stop her. Faith-based resilience also shifts the way she views failure. Many people see failure as proof of inadequacy, but the woman who listens to God sees failure as a stepping stone. She understands that falling short does not mean she is unworthy. She sees failure as part of the process of growth, and because she knows her worth is not determined by success or failure, she can rise after each fall. This resilience gives her the courage to take risks others would avoid. She dares to step into arenas where she might stumble, because she knows that even if she falls, God will lift her up again. That resilience makes her dangerous because she cannot be immobilized by setbacks. She keeps moving forward, even when the path is unclear, because her faith assures her that the one guiding her sees further than she can. Resilience through faith also reshapes her response to fear. Fear is one of the greatest tools of control in this world, but when a woman listens to God, she learns to respond differently. She may feel afraid, but she refuses to let fear have the final say. Instead of letting fear dictate her decisions, she brings her fear to God in prayer. She chooses to trust His promises more than the voices of doubt. She steps into situations that seem impossible because she believes that nothing is impossible with Him. That kind of courage rooted in faith makes her resilient, because even when fear whispers, she does not bow to it. She keeps her eyes fixed on God, and fear loses its grip. Another dimension of resilience through faith is the ability to endure seasons of waiting. Waiting is often the hardest test, because it feels like time is wasted, prayers are unanswered, and dreams are delayed. Many people give up in the waiting, convinced that silence means abandonment. But the woman who listens to God knows that waiting is not wasted. She trusts that in the hidden places, in the quiet seasons, God is still at work. Her resilience is demonstrated in her ability to keep believing, keep hoping, and keep preparing even when nothing seems to be happening. She waits with expectation, not despair, because she knows God's timing is perfect. That kind of faith-filled patience is rare, and it makes her dangerous because it allows her to stand firm when others would have quit. Resilience through faith is also marked by joy in the midst of hardship. This does not mean pretending everything is fine when it is not, but it does mean choosing gratitude even in pain. The woman who listens to God learns to count blessings in the middle of storms. She sees small rays of light even when darkness seems overwhelming. She praises not because everything is perfect, but because she trusts the one who holds her future. That joy confuses people because it does not make sense to the world. It is dangerous because it refuses to be extinguished by circumstances. It becomes a testimony to others that peace and joy are possible even in suffering when faith is alive. Resilience through faith also transforms her relationships. When she is hurt by others, she does not allow bitterness to take root. Instead, she draws on her faith to forgive, not because forgiveness is easy, but because she refuses to let resentment poison her soul. She understands that forgiveness is not about excusing wrong, but about freeing herself from chains of anger. This resilience in relationships allows her to move forward without being trapped in cycles of bitterness. It makes her dangerous because she cannot be controlled by offense. She lives in the freedom that comes from grace. Resilience also shows up in her vision for the future. She does not give up when things look bleak. She believes in restoration even when everything seems broken. She sees possibilities where others only see endings. Because she listens to God, she dares to dream again after disappointment. She dares to build again after loss. She dares to love again after heartbreak. Her resilience is not naive optimism. It is faith that has been tested and proven through fire. And that makes her dangerous because she becomes a builder of hope in a world that thrives on despair. Ultimately, resilience through faith means she refuses to let her circumstances have the final word. Only God has that authority in her life. She does not deny her pain, but she also does not surrender to it. She does not ignore her wounds, but she also does not let them define her. She carries her scars not as symbols of defeat, but as evidence of survival and victory through God's strength. Her resilience is not loud or boastful. It is steady, consistent, and unbreakable. The most dangerous woman is the one who listens to God, because through him she becomes resilient in ways the world cannot understand. She rises when others expect her to fall. She stands firm when others give up. She hopes when others despair. And she keeps moving forward, not because the road is easy, but because her faith tells her that God walks beside her. That resilience is unstoppable, unshakable, and undeniable. And it is the mark of a woman who is truly dangerous to anything that tries to keep her from her purpose. The radical impact of compassion is one of the most profound qualities of a woman who listens to God. And it is one of the reasons why she is so dangerous to the systems of fear, hate, and division that govern so much of the world. Compassion in its true form is not soft sentimentality or surface-level kindness. It is fierce, powerful, and transformative. It is radical because it disrupts cycles of cruelty, it dismantles walls of prejudice, and it refuses to let indifference win. When a woman listens to God, she learns to see people not through the lens of judgment, but through the eyes of love. That kind of compassion is not safe or convenient. It is revolutionary. A woman who listens to God understands that compassion is not optional. It is a calling. God does not merely suggest kindness. He commands love. And that love is not reserved for those who are easy to love. It extends even to enemies, strangers, and those who hurt us. To embody this level of compassion requires divine strength, because on our own, we would rather retaliate, withdraw, or protect ourselves. But when she listens to God, a woman begins to reflect his heart. And his heart is always for the broken, the forgotten, the marginalized, and even the oppressor who does not yet understand grace. That is what makes her compassion so dangerous, because it refuses to operate within the boundaries society sets for who is worthy of love. Compassion at this level is costly. It demands sacrifice. It requires her to give time, energy, and presence to people who may never repay her. It requires her to forgive when the world says hold grudges. It requires her to open her heart to the suffering of others when it would be easier to turn away. That kind of compassion threatens systems built on selfishness and greed, because it interrupts the endless cycle of taking, hoarding, and competing. Instead, it offers something radically different: generosity, empathy, and mercy. When a woman listens to God and chooses compassion, she begins to see beyond appearances. She sees the angry person not as an enemy, but as someone hiding pain. She sees the broken person not as hopeless, but as someone beloved by God. She sees the one the world discards as unworthy, and she dares to stand beside them saying, "You matter." This kind of compassion shakes the foundations of judgment because it dismantles labels. Society thrives on dividing people into categories: successful and unsuccessful, worthy and unworthy, strong and weak. But compassion erases those categories and insists that every person carries dignity. That truth is dangerous because once you believe it, you cannot participate in systems that dehumanize others. The radical impact of compassion is that it builds bridges where walls once stood. In a world addicted to division, compassion dares to create connection. The woman who listens to God does not care whether someone fits her background, her culture, her status, or her expectations. She cares about their humanity, and she treats them as a child of God. This bridge building is dangerous because it destroys the power of hate. Hate thrives on separation, but compassion thrives on connection. And once people begin to connect across lines of difference, the hold of hate is weakened. Compassion is also radical because it demands vulnerability. To be compassionate is to let yourself feel, to open your heart to another's suffering, to allow empathy to shape your actions. Many avoid compassion because it feels risky. It means you might be hurt, disappointed, or rejected. But the woman who listens to God knows that vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage. She chooses to let her heart remain soft in a world that constantly pressures people to become hardened. That softness becomes her greatest strength, because it allows her to meet others with love when they least deserve it. This makes her dangerous because hardness and cruelty cannot stand against a heart that refuses to stop loving. The radical impact of compassion is most visible in how it transforms both giver and receiver. When a woman lives with compassion, she brings healing not just to those she helps, but to herself. Compassion frees her from the prison of bitterness, anger, and self-centeredness. It gives her a larger vision of the world and a deeper sense of purpose. At the same time, those who encounter her compassion are changed too. They feel seen, valued, and loved, sometimes for the first time in their lives. That encounter with love can spark transformation in them, breaking cycles of pain and creating ripples that extend far beyond what she could imagine. This ripple effect is why compassion is so radical. It multiplies itself and spreads outward, changing communities, families, and even societies. When a woman listens to God and lives compassionately, she challenges the culture of indifference. Indifference is one of the greatest dangers of our time. Not hatred, but apathy, the refusal to care. But compassion refuses to look away. It refuses to stay silent when injustice reigns. It refuses to say, "That's not my problem." Instead, compassion says, "If it matters to you, it matters to me. If you are hurting, I will not turn my back." That refusal to be indifferent is dangerous to a world that thrives on detachment. Because once compassion takes root, it demands action. It moves from feeling to doing, from empathy to engagement. The radical impact of compassion is also seen in how it challenges injustice. Compassion does not merely feel sorry for those who suffer. It asks why they suffer and seeks to change the conditions that perpetuate suffering. The woman who listens to God will not settle for surface solutions. She will challenge the deeper issues of inequality, exploitation, and oppression. Her compassion drives her to stand up for those without a voice, to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, to risk her comfort for the sake of justice. That is why her compassion is dangerous to systems of power. It cannot be silenced, bought, or ignored. Compassion is radical because it is inclusive. It does not ask who deserves love. It simply gives it. It does not measure worthiness. It simply offers mercy. It does not discriminate. It embraces. The woman who listens to God does not check credentials before offering kindness. She does not ask whether someone has earned her compassion. She gives because she has received. And in doing so, she reflects the very heart of God, who loved us even when we did not deserve it. That kind of inclusivity is revolutionary because it threatens every structure built on exclusion and hierarchy. Ultimately, the radical impact of compassion is that it brings light into the darkest places. It reminds the forgotten that they are remembered. It brings hope to the hopeless. It softens hardened hearts. It restores dignity to the broken. It transforms anger into healing and despair into possibility. And all of this begins with one woman who listens to God and dares to embody His love in action. She becomes a force that cannot be stopped. Because compassion rooted in God is stronger than hate, stronger than fear, and stronger than injustice. That is why the most dangerous woman is the one who listens to God. Her compassion is radical, disruptive, and transformative. It terrifies those who rely on cruelty to maintain control. It exposes the emptiness of hate. It creates ripples of change that extend far beyond her own reach. And it proves, again and again, that love is the most powerful weapon we have. When a woman listens to God and allows His compassion to flow through her, she becomes not just a source of kindness, but a revolution in motion. Unshakable freedom is the crowning mark of a woman who listens to God, and it is one of the greatest reasons why she is considered dangerous by the systems, expectations, and voices that try to keep her small. To live in true freedom is to live unchained, not just outwardly but inwardly, not just from physical barriers, but from spiritual and emotional prisons. It is a kind of freedom that cannot be taken away because it does not come from circumstances, wealth, or status. It comes from the voice of God declaring, "You are mine, you are enough, and you are free." Once a woman embraces that truth, nothing on earth or in hell can bind her again. That is why she is unstoppable. Freedom in its truest form is not about doing whatever you want whenever you want. That is the shallow freedom the world sells, and it always leads back to chains. The freedom of God is different. It is the freedom to live without fear of judgment, without the heavy chains of people pleasing, without the exhausting need to earn love. It is the freedom to rest in who you are, knowing that your identity is secure in God's hands. When a woman listens to God, she learns that she does not have to chase validation. She does not have to mold herself into someone else's expectations. She does not have to shrink her voice or her presence to make others comfortable. She can live in the fullness of who she was created to be, and that is the essence of unshakable freedom. This kind of freedom is dangerous because it cannot be controlled. The world thrives on control, on keeping people bound by fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. Entire systems of power are built on convincing people that they are inadequate unless they conform, purchase, or perform. But the woman who listens to God breaks free from that. She no longer buys into the lie that her worth is tied to her productivity or her appearance. She no longer needs the approval of the crowd to feel valuable. She no longer fears the disapproval of others, because she knows the only voice that truly matters has already called her chosen and beloved. That unshakable freedom makes her immune to manipulation, and that is dangerous to anyone who tries to control her with fear. Unshakable freedom also manifests in how she relates to her past. Many people remain chained to what has already happened. Mistakes, regrets, failures, and wounds that replay in their minds like endless echoes. But when a woman listens to God, she hears Him say that her past does not define her. She learns that grace is bigger than guilt and redemption is stronger than regret. She chooses to walk in freedom from shame, refusing to let the shadows of yesterday dictate the brightness of today. That choice makes her resilient and unstoppable, because she no longer carries the weight of chains that were never meant to hold her. She can look at her scars without fear, knowing they are no longer signs of defeat, but testimonies of survival and growth. Her freedom is also unshakable, because it is not dependent on circumstances. She does not need everything to go perfectly in order to live fully. She does not need wealth, titles, or applause to feel valuable. She does not need everyone to love her or agree with her to stand confidently. Because her freedom is rooted in God, it remains steady no matter what storms come. She can face seasons of scarcity and still feel rich in spirit. She can endure loss and still walk in hope. She can walk through rejection and still stand tall, because her worth was never tied to external things in the first place. That steadiness terrifies those who try to control her through circumstances, because she cannot be shaken by what happens around her. Another dimension of unshakable freedom is the power to say no without guilt and yes without fear. A woman bound by people pleasing often says yes when she wants to say no, and no when she longs to say yes, because she is more concerned with keeping others happy than with honoring her truth. But the woman who listens to God finds freedom from that trap. She learns that her yes means nothing if it is forced, and her no is sacred when it is honest. She no longer feels the need to stretch herself beyond her capacity to prove her worth. She no longer fears disappointing others, because she knows obedience to God matters more than approval from people. This freedom allows her to live with integrity, making choices that align with her values rather than her fears. That kind of autonomy is threatening to those who rely on manipulation, because she cannot be guilted or shamed into submission. Unshakable freedom also empowers her voice. A woman who listens to God does not remain silent when she is called to speak. She does not hide her truth, suppress her perspective, or water down her message to keep others comfortable. She knows her voice was given to her for a purpose, and she uses it boldly, whether in her family, her community, or on a larger stage. This freedom of expression is dangerous to systems built on silence, because once a woman speaks her truth with the authority of God behind her, the chains of silence break for others as well. Her courage becomes contagious, inspiring others to step into their own freedom and speak their own truths. Unshakable freedom also liberates her from the endless trap of comparison. The world thrives on convincing women to measure themselves against one another, to compete, to compare, to constantly feel less than. But when a woman listens to God, she discovers that her path is unique and her story is sacred. She does not need to be anyone else, because she was never created to be anyone else. That realization frees her from jealousy, envy, and insecurity. She can celebrate others without feeling threatened, because she knows there is room for everyone in God's plan. That kind of freedom breaks cycles of competition and division, replacing them with unity and encouragement. It is dangerous because it dismantles the very system that thrives on keeping women insecure and at odds with one another. True freedom is also found in forgiveness. Unforgiveness is a prison, keeping people chained to bitterness and anger. But the woman who listens to God chooses to forgive, not because it is easy or because the wrong was small, but because she refuses to remain bound. She understands that forgiveness is not about excusing the wrong, but about freeing herself from its power. This choice gives her unshakable freedom, because she refuses to let anyone else's actions define her peace. That freedom is threatening to those who expect their harm to keep her small, because it proves that even betrayal cannot hold her down. Ultimately, unshakable freedom means living without fear of losing what was never hers to control. She is free from fear of rejection because she knows she is already accepted. She is free from fear of failure because she knows God redeems even her mistakes. She is free from fear of the future because she knows who holds it. She is free from fear of the past because she knows it has already been forgiven. She walks through life unbound, unashamed, and unafraid, and that makes her dangerous in the most beautiful way. The world cannot control a woman who is truly free. She does not need its validation. She does not fear its rejection, and she does not bow to its pressure. She walks in unshakable freedom because she listens to God, and His voice has broken every chain that once held her. That is why she is powerful. That is why she is unstoppable. And that is why she is dangerous. Not to the innocent, but to every lie, every fear, and every system that tries to keep her bound.